everyone, welcome back to Web TV. I've got with me some incredible panelists this afternoon. Marie-Lora MUNGAI. Marie-Lora MUNGAI. I tried to keep the pose where it should be.
Thank you.
CEO of Restless Global, and Jocelyne Muhutu-Remy, Managing Director, Spotify Sub-Saharan Africa. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation on the creative industries, what we are doing about it, what can be done about it, where we are currently as well. And Marie, I'd like to start with you. Just first introduce us to Restless Global, what you're doing within that space, and perhaps also what you're looking forward to in the Africa CEO Forum and as far as the creative industry is concerned.
Sure. Thanks, Terryanne. It's a pleasure to be here. So my company, Restless Global, is actually an advisory firm that is specialized in the creative industries and the sports sector. So what I do is that I advise very large institutions, mostly development finance institutions, so very large investors, but also private companies like Warner Brothers, Netflix, and others, on how to invest and finance the creative sector in Africa. So there's a lot of interest from these new players on the scene, and they're trying to understand the creative industries and how to support it. So that's basically what I do. I'm here at the CEO Forum with my client IFC. Yesterday we hosted the first ever creative industries session in the history of the Africa CEO Forum. So that's very exciting because really it shows that the creative industries are now increasingly being seen as a sector that is worthwhile of investment, as a serious sector alongside agriculture, health, and other traditional sectors.
Absolutely, and I am looking forward to unpacking some of the things that you have mentioned. Jocelyne, I guess Spotify does not need an introduction.
I guess not.
Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about your expectation for the Africa CEO Forum, perhaps some of the conversations that you have had, and your outlook for the next 2 days.
So it's the first time that I attend this forum. I am extremely impressed by the level of attendance. Yesterday I was part of Marie's Creative Industries roundtable. It was exceptionally good. We had a representation from different parts of the creative industry. There was fashion, there was gaming, there was film, and of course music. And I was able to explain there the focus that Spotify is putting on supporting the music industry and artists to make a living in Africa.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyne. Marie, I'll come back to you, and of course Restless Global, as you say, is focused on producing African-inspired content, and that of course has to come along with empowering, local talent. What are you doing within that space?
So it's really, Restless Global is really focused on channeling investment in the creative industries in Africa. And so what I do is providing advice, as I said, to investors. But there's another part of that, is that the creative sector is still emerging. So we have a multitude of small businesses, most of them are SMEs, and they still need to build capacity in order to be able to attract this investment. So just to tell you where we stand today, there is so among my client and the investment community, about $2 billion have been committed to invest in the creative sector in Africa as we're speaking now. This is huge, unprecedented. This is real money. However, the challenge we're facing now is where is that money going to go, right? So you're talking about empowering talents. That's really what I'm trying to do as well on that other side of the spectrum, is first of all, identify the opportunities, identify the creative entrepreneurs that have product market fit, that understand where they're going with their business, and helping them becoming investable.
Jocelyne, of course, I think one of the most exciting things I've seen Spotify do is seeing pictures of African musicians in New York, and of course that is courtesy of Spotify. Perhaps you can tell us what Spotify is doing with African artists so far, and the impact that you're seeing that beginning to have in the industry.
Supporting musicians, as I mentioned, is really at the center of everything we do. You mentioned those billboards in New York and other places. Taking African music to the world is a key focus for us. And when you see artists on billboards in different parts of the world, what we're doing there is really supporting their releases. It is supporting programs like Radar, for example, which is an emerging artist program. There's another program called Equal, where we celebrate women artists. So that's why we invest in these, marketing initiatives across the world. But very importantly, there is the revenue part. And this week, we were incredibly excited and proud, I must say, to announce the revenues that Nigerian and South African artists have received from Spotify. And those numbers are, let me tell you what they are, 25 billion naira went to Nigerian artists from Spotify alone. And in South Africa, it's 256 million rand. So we are really very proud of the work we've done in the past few years to become contributing leaders in the artist economy.
Marie, Jocelyne has mentioned, of course, Netflix. No, you mentioned Netflix, I think. But with the likes of Spotify, Netflix, Warner Bros., all these other multinationals that are now beginning to look at Africa, the rise of, African films on Netflix and the like, what impact do you see that having in, the funding opportunities or the funding gaps that currently exist?
I think the arrival of these global platforms has changed everything for African content and creatives. What this has done is really bringing African creativity to the world. So before the arrival of these global platforms, it was very difficult for African artists and creatives to really find an audience outside of their immediate neighborhood or city or country. Now all these borders have fallen off. An artist from a small town in Kenya and Nigeria can reach the world thanks to these platforms. Certainly Netflix has done a lot. It's been really pivotal in putting African film on the map. Same Spotify is doing this, pushed Tyla from South Africa, who has just won a Grammy. That's a big success story. On Netflix, we've seen the success of people like Edith Effiong with The Black Book. So really, it's changed everything. So what it does is that it's putting African creativity on the radar of investors. Suddenly they can actually listen to it or watch it at home and they understand the potential of it. So I would say that yes, these platforms have definitely been instrumental in bringing African creativity to the world.
Jocelyne, you'd like to add?
Yes, I just wanted to say that given the theme of the conference, what is happening now is that African art is sitting at the table. Yeah. And indeed, the Tyla example is a very, very good one. A year ago, Tyla was really very much an emerging artist, which we identified for our Radar program. Helped get exposure internationally via our global programs, and the rest is history, Grammy, and international stardom. But fundamentally, we are also interested in supporting not just the stars, but artists that are popular among a small group of people that are more niche. It's all really about contributing to job creation. Music is a job like any other, and in 5 years' time, I'd like to be able to say that we've helped thousands of African youngsters make a living. That is really the objective here.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the regulatory space, the licensing space, which is the elephant in the room, so to speak. How is Spotify managing, to navigate within that space? Given the space that I think different countries have always struggled with the creative industries in as much as regulation and licensing is concerned. How has Spotify managed that space?
So we do our licensing at a global level. All music that is on Spotify is licensed, obviously. However, piracy remains a challenge in some parts of Africa. Less and less so because there's no more incentive for users to go to pirate sites, given that they can listen to Spotify on the free platform as well. As you may be aware, we have a freemium model where you can use the platform for free, and that is advertising supported, or go for a subscription. So, since you have access to all the music in the world on this free platform, you have less incentive to go on pirate sites. So that is reducing the appeal of that business model. So it's the issue is reducing.
All right.
What I can say.
Marie, I want us to move on to the issue of impact, and just tell us, some example of stories or, some success stories that have had an impact that you may have been involved in that promote social and economic development.
Yeah, so at the moment, one of the missions that I have is actually for the French investment development institution Proparco. I'm conducting a 5-year project for them, and as part of this wider project, I'm actually doing a study on the success stories in the creative industries in Africa. And I'm very excited about this study. So sometimes we think, oh, there's a lot of research, and what about the action? But I'll tell you why it's important. It's important because at the moment, when you speak to both investors and entrepreneurs, what is a success in the creative industries in Africa is not very clear. So it's very difficult for entrepreneurs to model the way that they build their business because they don't know what success looks like. And it's very difficult for investors to identify the companies that have real potential. And so this study will show, we will profile at least 10 success stories in the creative space in Africa. In depth, we have talked to the founders to understand the key drivers for success. The most successful creative industries success story, a company to date, is Maven Records from Nigeria. Majority stake in Maven was just acquired by Universal Music. So the number hasn't been confirmed, but the number that's floating around is around 150 million. The investors that came in early on in this company have made multiples their investment. It's actually not only one of the biggest success by far in the creative industries, but it's also one of the biggest successes in any industry on the continent. And for those who don't know, Maven Records is the company that the record label started by Don Jazzy in Nigeria that represents Rima, for example, with a big hit, Calm Down with Selena Gomez. Of course, one of the top hits also on Spotify.
1 billion.
1 billion streams, right? So we can look up at Maven and see, okay, there is a way to reach that level of success.
Thank you, Marie. As we come to a close, Jocelyne, as the managing director of Spotify in Sub-Saharan Africa, what message do you have for, musicians and entrepreneurs who are looking to leverage on digital platforms to grow and to make an impact?
The first thing I would say is that being a musician is a business. I would really recommend artists to treat their art as entrepreneurs, and that means being very strategic with their marketing, being very strategic with the legal framework of their work, reading through contracts very closely, ensuring that they understand what they're committing to when they talk to their labels. It's also about constant learning. For example, we have a tool called Spotify for Artists, and even today we see very prominent artists who don't use it well enough and therefore lose out on promotional opportunities. So that is really one thing that I would put forward. And then be bold in using social media and find interesting new ways of promoting themselves. And lastly, go in front of your audience, perform live, This will hone your skills. This will help you build a community. Go around your own country, go around Africa, go around the world and meet your fans.
Thank you so much, Jocelyne. Marie, I guess the same question. You know, any advice that you may have? You've been in the industry in Kenya, across the world, for some time now. You have interacted with entrepreneurs in the creative space, in the film space. Perhaps you can just leave a word of advice, you know, to entrepreneurs in that space.
Sure, and it will be similar to what Jocelyne just said. Basically, what is lacking at the moment is a lack of business skills within the creative field. A lot of the creative companies that we're seeing are actually started by the creatives themselves, and a lot of them have not yet surrounded themselves with the skills that they need to become a fully fledged company. One person, unless this is also part of their own skill set, but does not need to be the key creative plus the CEO plus the chief financial officer plus the chief marketing officer. This is how you build a team. This is how you become a proper business. And some of these skills are still lacking. So there's a lot of people trying to tackle this. But if we are speaking directly to the entrepreneur today, I must say that there's a lot of information online. Be a bit proactive. You can just use Google, use ChatGPT, come to my website, see my LinkedIn. I write a lot of free content geared towards that. My newsletter is called Hustle and Flow, and every month I really try to give some of these tips to both entrepreneurs and investors. And so really people need to be proactive and look for the information to upskill themselves from a business perspective.
Wow, thank you so much. Really great insights. And we hope we'll be seeing you a lot more at bigger spaces at the Africa CEO Forum, and hopefully a lot more creatives. Because I think as a society and as a community, Africans are innately creative. You know, in our music, in our dance, in our food, in our plays. So I wish you all the very best. Ladies, I have been speaking with Marie-Lora MUNGAI, the CEO of Restless Global, and Jocelyne Muhutu-Remy, Managing Director, Spotify at Sub-Saharan Africa. Web TV is taking a short break. We'll be back in a moment. As always, I'm your host, Terryanne. CHEBET. We'll see you in a bit.